There are a number of fine art losses that impact the market, and perhaps whilst fire and theft grab the headlines on the traditional perils most individuals think about for insurances in fine art and generally in the high net worth market, there are a number of other related perils that I think are worth thinking about and reminding your clients of the importance to take out a high net worth all risks worldwide policy. I've highlighted here the main areas, and I'm going to talk through most of them. The one I'm not going to spend too much time on is natural perils. Thankfully, in the United Kingdom, we're in a relatively benign climate, so natural perils are not as impactful as they are in other territories worldwide. Although, as we've seen recently with the July cloudburst and flooding, particularly in London and the southeast, storm and indeed flood can and do occur even in the United Kingdom. But the wider natural perils, particularly of earthquake and hurricanes, thankfully do not impact the United Kingdom, but they will have a relevance on other territories where your clients may have properties overseas. Earthquake zones are well known in Japan and parts of the United States, but also in parts of Europe, particularly Monaco, Switzerland and Greece. And of course, hurricanes, particularly relevant in parts of the US, as we've seen recently in Florida, and tsunamis impact the Far East. But thankfully, the major natural perils that we're impacted by in the United Kingdom are storm and flood. Let's have a look at some of the main insurance type losses and the perils that they reflect. I suppose theft is possibly, although very traumatic undoubtedly for those involved in the event, is probably the press get behind this and see this as more worthy of the newsreels. High profile thefts have occurred throughout the 20th century. And indeed, the staggering stats that the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, put out is that they estimate art theft to be worth 4 to 6 billion per year worldwide, a sobering statistic. One of the most notable thefts, even though it dates back to 1990 in the art world, was the theft from the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, where 13 iconic world-class works were tragically stolen, including paintings by Rembrandt, Vermeer, Manet, and Degas. Despite, in recent years, a 10 million increase from 5 million reward, a 10 million rewards being offered by the museum, and the FBI launching a massive investigation, the works, and indeed the thieves, still remain at large. The heist itself, despite dating from 1990, remains the largest property theft in US history. Current value of the stolen artwork estimated at more than $600 million. And indeed, one of the most notable and tragic thefts is the work shown on the right, Rembrandt's Storm of the Sea of Galilee, dated from 1633. This is the only known seascape to have been completed by Rembrandt, and of course that in part, plus the fact that it's by such a famous artist and of such great quality, leads to its value estimations of north of $200 million today. Well, the market tried to respond to this loss, and indeed, possibly inspired or as a result of the Stewart Gardner Museum theft, the Art Loss Register was established in 1990. It's today the world's largest database for registering stolen artworks, and Ecclesiastical and a number of other insurers subscribe to the database, being accessible to us as insurers, the police worldwide, auction houses, and potential buyers. It's helped significantly to prevent stolen works being sold on, but it doesn't change the fact, as the FBI have commented, that that sort of underworld, what may be seen as glamorous, but of course in highly traumatic underworld of selling artwork behind closed doors, is still taking place. And indeed, there have been other notable thefts in the media in recent years, most notably the theft at Dresden Castle in November 2019, when an estimated €1 billion of royal jewellery was stolen from the Green Vault Museum within Dresden Castle in Dresden, Saxony and Germany. And there are other relevant thefts that I think are highly important. We've spoken already about Leonardo, and I thought it was important in the discussion about theft to think about the Mona Lisa itself, and it's perhaps not always remembered that the Mona Lisa itself was stolen in 1911 from the Louvre Museum in Paris. And I've often wondered whether Mona Lisa would have been as famous had it not actually been the impact of its theft in the early 20th century. In a time before modern technology and real media press, the theft of Mona Lisa in 1911 from the Louvre Museum created a media sensation. Its disappearance saw images of Mona Lisa splashed across international newspapers, becoming literally the best known painting in a time before we shared images on the TV, on the internet, or on phones. And today she's seen as the jewel in the Louvre's crown, a key driver in the over 9.7 million visitors that the museum sees year on year across its audiences. The theft itself is fascinating and the book of sort of almost stories. The handyman Vincenzo Peruggia, shown on the right with his mugshot from 1913, had been hired by the Louvre to make protective cases, ironically for some of its famous works, including the Mona Lisa. After hiding in a closet overnight, he simply removed the painting the next morning, hid it under his smock, and with the help, the unwitting help, of a plumber who unlocked the door, waltzed out of the building and vanished along with the painting for nearly 2 years. He was eventually caught trying to sell the work to the Uffizi in Florence director at the time, and the work was recovered in December 1913, almost 2 years after it had been stolen. And reports claimed that the work was kept in a suitcase for most of that time under a bed in Vincenzo Peruggia's Italian apartment. So the story of Mona Lisa is indelibly connected actually with its fame and stardom, and perhaps that is a key driver in why it's so famous today. Turning to the next peril that I think most clients think of, along with theft, is of course fire. And it's a fire concern that is possibly one of the oldest natures of insurance itself, and is often again overlooked as being an impact to the fine art market. Thankfully, fires do not take place as a regularity, but when they do, of course, the impact potentially of them in terms of damage, both the damage of the fire and the resultant smoke and water damage, has a dramatic impact on the actual claim cost and the recovery and the restoration that can be done to many artworks. And to make the point, of course, when I say art, we're not just talking about paintings and sculpture. Indeed, our definition of art is really anything that can be bought or sold at auction. Looking at the image on the right reminds us that rare books, manuscripts, coins, medals, trophies, anything that you can think of that could be bought or sold in a modern auction can be categorized as fine art. You start thinking about the remit and the implications of fire and other perils on all forms of art. Fire is an area that many insurers, rightly so, take seriously, and is a key part of the assessment we do with our risk surveyors, is analysing the importance and the level of detection offered by fire detection systems. And it won't surprise you to know that we regularly recommend that clients test their smoke alarms and ensure that fire detection systems and on-site firefighting equipment are adequate for the location and in good working order. Again, it's often overlooked as electrical faults are a common cause of fire, and the likelihood of a fault increases with the age of the installation. And this is another area where ecclesiastical work with you both at quote and at survey stage to make sure that clients are aware of the needs to have their electrics regularly inspected. As per the NIC guidance, every 10 years for domestic installations is the recommended course of action. And we're talking here, of course, about not just protecting property and artwork, but protecting the life of the incumbents that live in that property as well. Gas appliances, and indeed increasingly biomass boilers that we're seeing in the high net worth space, particularly in rural areas, should be inspected annually. Chimneys should be regularly cleaned before and after winter use and flue linings checked for decay. Fireplaces should have fire guards, and portable heating appliances should be avoided wherever possible. All this is obvious stuff, but it's worth reminding clients of the need to keep good basic risk management in place to give them the best possible chance of avoiding fire. Water damage is again an area which is perhaps not usually associated with impacting the fine art market, but can take various forms and can be incredibly damaging to art, whether it's on the wall or on the floor. Various forms of water damage, ranging from simple water penetration to burst pipes or flood, represent a common cause of loss. Indeed, recently in the cloud downburst that we saw impacting London and parts of the southeast, rain entering at surface water level and running down into ground floor rooms or basements can be another impactful area of damage in the high net worth space. To ensure that the basics of risk management are complied with, ensure that the property's roof is in good order with any missing or slipped tiles replaced. Roof valleys, gutters and downpipes should be regularly cleared of debris to prevent overflow. All water installations, including pipes, should be adequately lagged to protect from freezing. And an area that the high net worth market are increasingly focusing on, and indeed so are ecclesiastical, is the consideration of installing water leak detection systems. And we're keen to give you advice and your clients advice on installing the right water leak detection system for the right properties and the right needs of the client. There are a number of different solutions out in the market, and we'd be delighted to discuss this in more detail with you at either survey or with our underwriters directly. And then lastly, accidental damage and damage in transit. I've grouped these two together, although arguably they are specific areas of impact to the claims market. It sounds incredibly obvious, but an artwork is at its most vulnerable when it's being moved. From the moment it is lifted off a wall until the moment it's back on the wall or safely on its pedestal or in its case, it is vulnerable. The importance of using established fine art specialist shippers and packers cannot be underestimated. If an artwork is being moved any distance, it needs to be suitably packed, handled, and as appropriate stored. The mantra here really is don't try this at home. Let the specialists take control. When artwork is moving significant distances, always consider getting a condition report, preferably both before the work is packed and after it immediately arrives. This will help in identifying any damage that's been sustained during the transit itself, or indeed whilst the artwork is out on loan. I've mentioned use of knowledgeable shippers and packers, and there are a number out there. And again, our specialist underwriters and surveyors will be happy to give advice on companies that we have experience and close relationships with. And if the in-transit is international, consider again the knowledge and the pedigree of the fine art shipper that's being used. On occasions, there could be subcontracts involved in the transit, and it's important to understand the level of due diligence and experience the company has in international transit and transportation.